Before Shadow Labyrinth came along and offered a horrifyingly grim take on the Pac-Man property, there was Pac-Man 2: The New Adventures. Okay, alright. Try to be nice. Pac-Man 2: The New Adventures, released in 1994 for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System and the Sega Mega Genesis Drive thing, the latter version of which has been a subject of review back in 2019, so a little over 6 years ago. So we may as well revisit this fraudulent sequel to Pac-Man on Super Nintendo, and yes, I said fraudulent sequel, because while the Western world baffled themselves to an early grave wondering how this thing was worthy of being bestowed the numerical sequel status to this, the Japanese audience didn't have this problem because this game was just called Hello Pac-Man, which is, well, yes, I could see why they changed the title to something a little more marketable, but we're still left wondering why this is called Pac-Man 2: The New Adventures and not just Pac-Man: The New Adventures, which would have been fine as a title. It's the 2 that throws the whole equation off. It's sort of like making a semi-decent ninja action game on the Nintendo DS and then for some reason calling it The Legend of Kage 2, implying that it's a sequel to the subpar years-old arcade title The Legend of Cage. I mean, why would you do that? Why would you burden that game with such an awful, awful legacy? This is, of course, purposeful padding for the sake of delaying the inevitable. But it's about that time that we checked out this version of Pac-Man 2 for SNES because I am miserable and I'm going to share my misery with all of you. Enjoy. So as you could probably surmise from the footage, The New Adventures takes the form of a point-and-click adventure game with a vaguely unique premise of sorts in that, rather than directly controlling Pac-Man with your point-and-click endeavoring, Pac-Man is a character that does whatever he feels like doing, and your task is to have him do whatever you want him to do. This is mostly done by moving the cursor in a general direction or a specific item and pressing a button to have Pac-Man check it out, or shooting a few pellets with your slingshot. However, the added wrinkle to this formula is Pac-Man's mood. If he's in a good mood, he'll follow your general direction, but if he's in a sour mood, then he'll just blow you off, and it'll take a little working. So as you are trying to get him to do the things you want him to do, he'll walk into a wall, off a cliff, bump into things, let rocks fall on his head. Apparently, a lot of this, I'm told, is inspired by the Pac-Man cartoon produced by Hanna-Barbera decades ago, which I've never seen. So somebody should probably clue me in as to whether Pac-Man was as much of a pussy in that show as he is here. Actually, you know what? Don't bother. I really don't want to do. I really don't care anyways. The game is divided into 4 episodes such as it is, each with a main goal. Episode 1 is about getting milk for the baby. Episode 2 is about getting flowers for a girl. Episode 3 has Ghost stealing Pac Jr.'s bike and you gotta get it back. And episode 4 builds to the final confrontation with the Ghost Queen herself, and all of these things are dependent on your trying to dictate actions to this thing pretending to be Pac-Man and whether he's in a mood to care. And when he doesn't care, then neither should you. So you start pelting the bastard with your slingshot, he'll do something stupid, a hilarious cutscene will play, and maybe the scene will reset you so you could try again. There are no lives or continues here, no consequences for bad decisions, he just keels over, dies, and you redo the scene. So have at it. I find that engaging in animations that puts Pac-Ninny through copious amounts of agony and misery is more thrilling and entertaining than the actual game you're supposed to be playing. But going through the actual story bits is what you have to do if you want to open up more of the world to explore. That means dealing with frustrating hang glider segments or minecart segments that really aren't worth a damn. These are actually my least favorite segments in the game because they control awkwardly, and honestly the less said the better in that regard. Sometimes you'll come across ghosts that you'll have to fend off against, which you can do by giving Pac-Man a power pellet, which turns him into Super Pac-Man because, sure, why not? And you could even play a port of the original Pac-Man and even miss Pac-Man once you've acquired the 3 cart pieces to unlock the game. essentially updated versions of the NES ports of these games. Certainly not the best versions, and hell, Ms. Pac-Man would later see a solo SNES outing from Williams based on the Tengen port that's pretty damn slick in spite of some obvious drawbacks. But it's a nice bonus regardless, and I suppose in the grand scheme of things, even if they're not perfect,
it's better than nothing. At least that's my opinion.
The New Adventures is a nice looking game. It might not be the most well played game, even within the context of point and clicks, but there was care in giving this game the sort of Saturday morning cartoon vibe that resonates throughout. The cartoonish characters, the bright colorful settings, the little animations that play out. The SNES version does sport some brighter colors, some cleaner shades, and some smoother bits in places compared to the Mega Drive version, which looks fine on its own, but it's a bit lacking in some places. However, the big improvement comes from the sound output. The music better fits the visual feel with the sampled bits over the Genesis synth, and there's also a bit more clarity with the sound effects and vocal bits, which are still largely gibberish, but it's slightly cleaner sounding gibberish. And that's where the New Adventures almost shines for me. Once you have enough world to explore and just mope around, admire the scenery, and torture Pac-Poop endlessly, there's a pure, wholesome, stupid joy to be had in watching these silly animations play out, and really that's where the real fun lies in the interactivity or lack thereof, sometimes just doing stuff and seeing what happens. That's usually where the real joy in these sorts of games come from, but in terms of playing it as the actual game and going through the narrative and all that, it's decidedly less so. I suppose for the sake of curiosity, it might be worth sampling, and who knows, you might actually take a genuine liking to this. For me, however, there are better point and clicks out there, and certainly far better uses of Pac-Man in the wild. But of course, as it is with these polarizing subjects, your mileage will vary.